Hey everyone, let's take a look at how we would put in some formulas, some mathematical formulas into Python. All right, so let's create a new file for ourselves and we're going to go ahead and save it as practice math formulas. And we got to have our comments. Remember, we gotta label this with our name, some sort of date information so we know when this code was written, and then just a brief description about what the code does. So we're going to practice math formulas. We won't capitalize that because we're just using regular math, not a module. Math formulas in Python. All right. So what I've got over here on one side of the screen is just some common formulas that you might want to use from math to calculate some different things. So let's see how we would put those in Python. All right, so we've got area, for instance. So let's say we've got our side is equal to 10, or we could, of course, get this. Let's actually practice getting this from the user. So maybe we'll say input, enter the length of one side of a square. This is the formula for the area of a square. And then the formula for calculating area of a square would be side squared. So we could do this a couple different ways. We can either say, square area, or whatever we want to call it, is equal to side exponent 2, or we could say square area, and we'll say 2 because this is our second version of the same thing, is side times side, because really side squared is really the same thing as side times side. And then if we print these, so we're going to say print square area, and let's also just go ahead in the same statement, print square area 2, and let's run this and see what we get. So we're going to enter the length of one side of the square, so we'll say it's 5, and in both cases we get 25, so either one of those are going to work. Alright, so that's the area of a square. Let's comment this out. And let's take a look at some more complex formulas. So, for example, let's say we have the area of a trapezoid. So let's do this. Alright, so for the area of a trapezoid, we have area is equal to 1/2 times base 1 plus base 2 times height. So if we were getting this information from a user, we would actually be asking for 3 pieces of information in order to be able to calculate the area of a trapezoid. So the first thing we need is base 1, and we're going to calculate. So we want this to be a float. Input, enter, we'll just say enter first base, or we'll say, yeah, first base sounds good. You always want to make sure you're giving your users good instructions so that they know what kind of data you expect them to enter. That's just part of creating a good interface for the user. So we're going to have our second base, enter second base, and we might even be really nice and print, let's calculate the area of a trapezoid. And again, we're just making a good interface for our users so they know what our program does. So the third piece of information we're going to need is height. And we're going to get that from our user. Input, enter the height. Alright, so after we have those 3 pieces of information, we can calculate our area of a trapezoid. Alright, so we can see over here that we've got 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times height. And we want the base 1 plus base 2 to be in parentheses because we want to add these together before we actually multiply it by the height. So we're going to we could either use 0.5 because that's the same thing as 1/2, or we can just go ahead and divide 1/2 by 2. We're going to say times base 1 plus base 2, and then we're going to multiply that times the height. Right? And then we'll print for the user the area of a trapezoid so we can check and see if this is correct. So we're going to run, see what happens, enter the first base. So let's say we enter 10 and we enter 5 and maybe our height is 4. We get 30, and we would add 4 plus 15 together. So we're going to have 0.5 times 15, which will get us 7.5 times 4, which will get us 30. And that's pretty much how it works. So we end out having Python do the work for us for these particular formulas. So let's look again at something maybe even a little bit more complex. So let's go down and let's look at the distance between points. So here we've got the case where we have the distance between 2 points is going to be the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus x2 minus y2 minus y1 squared. First thing we need to notice is just like we did over here in the area of a trapezoid, we have base sub 1. There's no way to do this in Python. Really, this is just the name of this variable 1. This subscript really doesn't have any particular meaning. They could have actually just called this base 1 and it's the same thing. And that's essentially what we did over here in Python. So it would be the same if this was base sub 0 or base sub I. Again, that's just a name. This subscript doesn't really mean anything mathematically. This is still just the name of this particular variable. So we're just going to change it. So instead of base sub 1, it's just going to be base number 1. This is just the full name of the variable. This number doesn't have any mathematical meaning. It just means we have two different bases, so we called them base 1 and base 2. We could have called these base A and base B, and it would have been exactly the same thing. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to do the same thing over here. Let's comment this out. The same thing with our distance formula, and we'll print out for the users. Let's calculate the distance between 2 points. So we're letting the users know what we're going to do in the program. And now to calculate the distance between 2 points, we need our first xy coordinate and we need our second xy coordinate. So we're going to have x1 is going to be equal to float input. Remember, input returns a string, so we're going to want to calculate this or cast this as a float. So we're going to say enter the x value for the first point. And it's nice when you kind of put a colon and a space there. It just makes it a little bit easier when they're entering it. And then we can have x2. We could do this in any order. It doesn't really matter. It's just going to save them into the appropriate variables in the order that we give it. All right, so enter the x value for the second point. And we need another parentheses. Oh, too many parentheses. All right, so then we have y1 and cut and paste this. In this case, we're interested in the y value for the first point. And then we're going to get the y value for the second point. And change that. All right, so once we have all 4 points, then we're going to go ahead and do our formula for the area. We have all the variables, all the data that we need for our formula. So now we're going to go ahead and put that formula into Python. So we can call this distance between points. Kind of a long variable name, but it does tell us what exactly it is that we're calculating and storing inside this variable. And now, to take the square root, we'll learn in a couple weeks about how to use the math module to do that. At the moment, we don't really know how, we don't have a built-in function to do that. But if you ever take the square root of something, that's the same thing as taking it to the 1/2 power, so it's really this. So if you want to take the square root, you can also raise it to the 1/2 power. That does exactly the same thing, so that's what we're going to do. So we're actually going to take what's inside of that square root and we're going to raise that to the 1/2 power. So what's inside of the square root is the x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So that's what we're going to put inside of these parentheses, and that's what's going to be raised to the 1/2 power. So we're going to have x2 minus x1, and we want to raise this to the 2 to the second power. We want to square it, and then we're going to add this to y2 minus y1, 1, and again we're squaring this, and we've got this inside of our parentheses that once we've done all of this, so what's going to happen here is we're going to look at the fact, we've got these parentheses that we want to do first. Inside of these parentheses, we want to do these parentheses first. So this is going to get done. This is going to get done. Then both of these are going to be raised to the 1/2 power. Then those values will be added together, and then all of that is going to be taken to this 1 divided by 2 will be done before the exponent because it's inside of a pair of parentheses. So that's how we do our distance formula equation. So hopefully this will help you take a look at other equations and see how to translate those from regular sort of mathematical notation into something that Python will be able to calculate. So let's run this and make sure that we don't have any syntax errors. And we're going to have, let's see, we've got maybe 1 and 3, 2 and 5. Oh, we never printed it. It's another thing to note. We won't actually get anything out on the screen unless we remember to print it out. So there we go. Python fun. All right, 3, 1 and 5, and there we go. We'll have our distance, and if we wanted to round that, so our distance between the points 2, 1 and 3, 5 is a 4.12. If we wanted that to say 2 decimal places, we can use the round function, which we'll learn more about when we talk about the math module, but we can preview it now just for fun. Taking a look at some different points here, and we've got 2.24, and in this case we get it exactly to 2 decimal places. So just kind of a fun little preview for using the round function well, actually, round function is built in. We don't even need to import the math module to use it. Round is a nice little built-in function that Python provides for you to be able to round your numbers.